Indeed.com/credit. That's Indeed.com/credit. Terms, conditions, and quality standards.
The following program is a paid presentation. The views and or opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of KWAM. Welcome to the Variety Hour, where local leaders talk Memphis.
Listen to you move your mouth. I bet you come from way down south. Now don't tell me, let me guess. You from the town that I love best. Talk Memphis, I wish you would. Talk Memphis, you sound so good. Talk Memphis, high on the bluff. I swear I can't get enough. Listening to you talk that stuff. Talk Memphis, oh yeah. Talk Memphis.
This is the Memphis Real Estate Hour with your host, Dean Harris, on KWAM. And now, here's your host, Dean Harris.
All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Memphis Real Estate Hour. I am your host, Dean Harris. I appreciate you guys tuning in this morning. I'm with CrestCore Realty over on Summer Avenue. If you guys are tuning in at AM 990 or FM 107.9, appreciate you tuning in on the radio. The Memphis Real Estate Hour, guys, will concentrate on investing in Memphis real estate, and we'll focus on our residential market a little bit as well. I'll have local and national vendor partners of ours on the show from time to time to share knowledge with you on how to become an investor in Memphis or how to become a better investor here in Memphis. I remind you guys every single show that I am an investor. If you have that old home that you need to sell quickly, or if you know someone that has that old home they need to sell quickly, give me a call. It's 901-619-6170, and we'll get you a cash offer on that home. I don't care what the condition is. I don't care where it's at. Or how long it's been vacant or how long it's been occupied. Doesn't matter to us. Just shoot me a text or give me a call, 901-619-6170, and we will help you get an offer on that property today. Facebook Live, guys, if you have not joined us on Facebook Live yet, we would welcome you to do that. You can go to the show's Facebook page, The Memphis Real Estate Hour, and you can tune in and watch us here live in the studio. And if you missed today or you're not up at this hour normally, then that's fine. You can just go back to the page and click on the video link, the Memphis Real Estate Hour Facebook page video link, and we'll have all of the show's videos and their titles, so you can go back and listen to a topic that might interest you a little bit more. Last week on the show, we had Spencer Shadrack. Spencer is a wholesaler, flipper, investor that got his start at CrestCore years ago. And Spencer has grown into a very successful investor here in town, wholesaler and flipper, like I said, and we enjoyed having him on. He kind of gave us a State of the Union, so to speak, on the wholesale business here in Memphis, and we basically just kind of told his story of how he got started from collecting rent at CrestCore to where he's at right now. So we were happy to have him on. If you missed that show, again, you can go back to the show's Facebook page and watch the video from last week. Today's show, we're going to have the investment of the week at about 8:30, and Dan and I are going to talk about, Dan Butler is in the studio with me this morning, so we're going to talk about 6 ways to accurately assess rental property performance this morning. So we're going to dive right into it, Dan, because I know the first part of the show is pretty good as far as getting that information out immediately. So let's talk just for a second about 6 ways to accurately assess rental property performance. First, welcome to the show.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. I'm excited to talk about this because a lot of people that I come in contact with from an investor standpoint, or even just from somebody that's interested in it, they always lean on me to tell them, is this a good property or not? And although that's good, because we're leading people down the right path, it's important, I think, to educate our listeners, investors, whether it's nationally or even locally, on how to accurately assess a rental property. So let's start off. There's 6 of these points. We're gonna get through these today, but the first one is the 1% rule. Tell the listeners what the 1% rule is.
1% rule is Bigger Pockets kind of made that a probably pretty popular percent rule, and I'll go into probably mine as well, what I came up with years ago. But 1% rule is basically saying the 1 month's rent divided by the cost of the property is equal to 1%. So that would be $1,000 rent divided by $100,000 would be 1% rule. And people, have their own theories on those calculations, but I think the gist of it, if I did some math here, in that specific example, 1% rule, $100,000 house, $1,000 rent, you put 20% down, and that thing will cash flow with a return, say of 5 to 8% on a 30-year note.
That's right.
It's a 30-year note in that example. So that's why people, very passive investors, a lot of guys out of California that are just looking to throw some money into an investment.
Yep.
That works. When I was first starting out, mine was actually the 1.5% rule.
Right. That we're going to get to, like, what kind of properties do we find? But yeah, so your rule of thumb was 1.5%.
Yeah. I'm an engineer by background, and so when I'm driving around, when I was looking at deal after deal after deal, I was like, man, it was driving me crazy to go back and put in my Excel spreadsheet the rents, the taxes, insurance, and maintenance, and all that stuff, and coming up with was it a good cash flowing property?
Right.
And I finally figured it. It was a light bulb moment one night. I was like, there's got to be a correlation. Like houses in Berkeley typically are $350 to $450 taxes, which means the insurance is probably around $400 to $500, and so they're all very close, but depending on the neighborhoods, kind of the.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
And so I came up with a 1.5% rule for me, and what that did was that told me that I could buy the property, say that $800 rent, $54,000 property, 1.5%. I knew I could put that on a 15-year note, and I would essentially break even, have a little bit of fluff, but I'd cover every single expense, and in 15 years I'd have a paid-off asset.
So an $800 rental, you paid how much?
Say $54,000.
Okay. And that would you wouldn't really cash flow. You just basically cover the payment.
Yep, that's a $340 note with 20% down. In my instance, a lot of times, or Douglas and I's instance, it would be I didn't put the 20% down. I figured out ways to season it, refinance it, and get the $54,000 loan, which then put that note closer to $400. So if you remember, and we'll talk about this more as we go through the other examples, if you use the 50% rule for expenses, what's that? At an $800 rent, what does that leave you with? $400.
That's exactly right.
Right?
Yeah.
I got enough to pay my mortgage.
So, yeah, because you've always told, and I've heard you say this 100 times, take 50% out of the gross rent, and if it still works for you, then it's a deal.
That's right.
If it still can make sense, cash flow, or break dead even at that point, it makes sense, because not every month you're going to have 50% expenses on your rent.
Not every month, no, but you're building escrow, maintenance reserves, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
You might have zero maintenance one month, and you might have 1,000 the next month. I mean, you just got to be prepared for those ups and downs, depending on, what's going on. One
of my questions for you is, how hard is this to find? I know you don't find. That's kind of my job now.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll ask myself that question, but
how hard is it to find?
So how hard is it to find?
Yeah, how is it?
It can be. Those are the 1%ers aren't hard.
Right.
We can find those properties. So you've got to be able to finesse the terms of that deal in order to make it work, like what you've said. I can often find better deals than that, than the 1%, but it's a good rule of thumb to say, hey, this is kind of my floor of properties that I'll look at. And then even then you've got to finesse those numbers and move it around, kind of like you just said. So what types of houses are you getting, Dan? In other words, what kind of condition, tenants, price range? I mean, is there a certain price range that you find more often than not in this 1% rule?
Well, and it's a great question, and I'd love to go all the way into the 3% rule, talk through that a little bit, because there was a ton of stuff that we bought at 3%, and I'll tell you how that all ended. But
sounds great.
It sounds great, yeah. You can tell my tone, my sarcasm. So the 1% rule, you're going to find like Cordova, Bartlett, East Memphis. So you're going to see a lot of
Colonial
houses, Colonial Acres. Something from 80 to 120 plus. That new construction is actually sometimes getting below 1%. I've seen, a New Zealand friend of mine came in town 2 weeks ago, and he's selling $14.95 rents and selling the house for $174. I don't know what that.
And people are buying it.
And people are buying it. I mean, he's pre-selling them.
And they're all brand new construction houses?
Yes. Yep. 174. That is a .085. that right? Yeah.
And and
0.85.
investors are okay with it. That's kind of what I'm.
Because it's new, it's got warranty. They've made it robust. It's got like concrete floors. It's got part brick, part hardy board.
Built to be a rental.
Built to be a rental. That's right. Very basic. Not a lot of bells and whistles.
How much of that are you seeing?
He's got. There's one guy out there that's got 90 houses being built right now to build to rent.
Just brand new construction houses for rentals.
Our buddy Hunter was on a couple months ago, and I
Yep.
sent him an article of LinkedIn. There's neighborhoods on the outside of Greenville, South Carolina, that are doing the same thing. He's like, man, those numbers don't work. I said, they work for somebody. That's what I replied back.
Well, that is true.
So-
that is true. That statement there is the one. It works for somebody.
That's
It
right.
might not work for everyone, but the 1% rule does work. In my experience, for the investors that are listening, I can typically find a little bit better than 1%. I think that needs to be your floor. I think that needs to be your base, and then you try to get better from there. Now, if you're in the situation like you just mentioned, these new construction houses, that you just want to be extreme passive and you're willing to accept a little bit lower, I guess that's up to you and your own personal kind of preference.
Yeah.
But I can find you a little bit better numbers than that, so that's good.
Well, when the market was tanked, people really were trying to go after the 2% rule. Bigger Pockets was huge in promoting the 2% rule, which is another way to look at that is 50 times rent. So that $800 rent, you're looking for a property that's $40,000. And that's
ain't a whole lot of those out there.
Those aren't out
Now
there.
that's harder to find.
That's hard to find, right? So the 2% rule is very hard to find. I think, and I was going to give you a quick story about the 3% rule.
Yeah,
there's a ton of stuff that we bought that was, say, $500 rent, and what's that, $20,000 house.
Yeah.
So fast forward a few years, going forward, and it's like, man, we're probably trying to sell half that stuff. And just we cannot will it to be profitable.
As much as you try.
As much as you try, a robust
and it's the
flooring.
Tenant base.
It's the tenant base. It's the turnover. It's the hard. They're hard on the property, and not all of them are like that. There's some pockets we have actually good success with it. So we've figured out what those pockets are.
Keep those.
And keeping those, but the other ones we're letting go.
Letting
We're just
go.
saying, it's not worth. And my mentor, I had lunch with him a couple weeks ago, and he's like, well, you learned the same thing I did. It didn't matter how cheap that property. Everybody looks at how cheap it was and say, well, there's just no way you could lose. And he's like, yes, you can.
Yeah, you can too.
So that's an interesting.
Because you don't factor in. You can't factor in the human element of it.
Correct.
You can't say who's coming to live in that house.
Yeah, your eviction, your turnover cost, your maintenance is more like 40% instead of 20. Your vacancy, bad debt's more like 20 than. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, so you got to take a whole lot out of that restaurant to make sense.
That's right.
We're live in the studio this morning talking with Dan Butler of CrestCore Realty about 6 ways to accurately assess rental property performance. We've just talked about the 1% rule, so that's kind of a base that you can use and go by. I typically can find you a little bit better than that. So if you call in after the show or we talk later in the week, just understand, yes, I can get you those. Those are safe investments, but we can do a little bit better than that 1% rule. Number 2 on our list was cash flow.
Yeah.
This is a popular question too, is how much is this going to cash flow? And some of the things that you've got to take into account, when you think about cash flow, it's, your mortgage, your insurance, property taxes, management fees, accounting, HOA, maintenance. I mean, you can go on and on. What are some of the things, the musts? Because I've dealt with some guys in the past that can spreadsheet a house to death.
Yeah.
They can figure out ways to put stuff on there, figure out different things to put on there to make the property not work.
Yeah.
Overanalyzing, just really working.
Analysis by paralysis.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, man! That one particular investor just, I can't blame him because that's the way he wanted to do it. But man, you weren't going to buy anything ever at that rate. So what are some of the things that you must put on, your budget to assume and affect your cash flow?
I wrote down 8 to 10% management.
Okay.
Depending on who you're with, and that's a whole other probably conversation of, just because somebody's 8 versus somebody's 10, there's like, well, that's 2% different. Like,
think about that number.
Understand what you're getting. If you're not getting any kind of communication, you're just getting a statement in the month. For 8% versus 10%, you're getting a lot of reporting.
And let's talk about that number.
Yeah.
I mean, 10% of $1,000 rental is
$100.
8% is $80. We're only a difference of $20.
Right.
So what you're getting for that, unless you've got a portfolio of 100 or 200, I mean, you need to think about.
Yeah, I mean, if you got
that
scale,
yeah,
then I think there's a conversation of where that. Yeah. But I mean, for any kind of property manager, I mean, that $20 is worth. That's the difference between profit and loss from a property management.
That's exactly right,
and
so, for the investor too.
For the investor,
But
and I assume 10% for vacancy and bad debt.
Mm-hmm.
And people are like, what's bad debt? I'm like, that's debt that potentially could turn into eviction.
That's right.
So they carried over $100 balance.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So you keep carrying it, or late fees or whatever. So I assume 10% for taxes, insurance. That's a close number, just to get something quick. And then I put 20% for maintenance and escrow. Mm-hmm. That's where I get my 50. And that's probably we should probably get some other operators in here and see what their assumptions are, because I hear the number 35% a lot of times.
That's about what I tell investors, and depending on the area. If you're in 118, 116, some of our good areas, I try to think 30 to 40. Shoot at 35% of your gross rent, and that's kind of what I would take out. What's typical cash flow on? We'll use our $1,000 rental since we've been using that as an example. But what should investors, from a cash flow standpoint, expect? On that $1,000 rental, what should they be looking at?
Well, depending on if it's using your assumptions or mine.
Let's use yours.
I mean, at 35% or 50%, you $1,000 a month. That's $12,000. You're talking about $6,000 left over for either to pay a mortgage or to pay yourself, right? Mm-hmm. If you use 35%, you're probably closer to what, $8,000 cash flow?
Yeah,
does that sound right?
Times 12, yeah. Which
is possible. I mean, I talked to a guy yesterday who's buying 4 houses that are, $1,400 rents, and it's the 1% rule, and I think he's going
to do okay.
He's going to do okay because those are higher end houses. Those tenants typically going to take care of the small stuff that doesn't cause you, a lot of pain. So,
I'm live in the studio with Dan Butler this morning. We're going to take a real quick break here. We're talking about 6 ways to accurately assess rental property performance. When we come back, we're going to talk about net operating income and return on investments. You guys stay tuned. You're listening to the Memphis Real Estate Hour on AM 990 Memphis.
You're listening to the Memphis Real Estate Hour on KWAM. We'll be right back after this.
Now, here's Mid-South weather from News Channel 3's Severe Weather Center. Brought to you by the Crescent Club, hosting the people and ideas that moved Memphis forward for nearly 30 years. Poplar and I-240. Call for a free tour at 901-684-1010.
Fantastic weather continuing across the Mid-South with sunshine and high temperatures nearing 70 this afternoon. We'll drop into the lower 40s overnight, and we'll see increasing clouds on Wednesday, mid-60s for highs, and a chance for showers by tomorrow night. Let Green King Spray make your neighbors green with envy. Have the best looking yard in the neighborhood by calling Green King Spray at 901-831-9466 or visit greenkingspray.com. I'm News Channel 3's Todd Demers on The Voice, FM 107.9 and AM 990.
Is it a good time to buy or refi? Is it a buyer's market or a seller's market? Are interest rates going sky high soon? Hi, I'm Ludi Calloway, the mortgage lady at iBank Mortgage. I tell my customers to ask questions, get answers. So join me every Monday morning at 8, and I will tell you what's going on in today's still changing mortgage world. Remember, most people think about mortgages a few times in their lives. I think about them every single day. Tune in Mondays at 8.
Investors or buyers, if you're looking for the best customer service and most competitive rates on a home loan, come to Brighton Bank. They offer a quick approval process, fast closing, and they even finance 85% of the purchase in most cases. At Brighton Bank, they work with every kind of loan: BAFHA, USDA programs, traditional conventional, financing programs, long-term fixed financial, and bridge loans made easy. When it comes to home loans, they mean business. Call them today, 901-758-1740.
Griffin Clift, Everton, and Mashmeyer. PLLC is a full-service law firm with over 50 years of experience in the Memphis area. Real estate closings have continued to be the forefront of their law practice, which include residential, commercial, and development real estate transactions, drafting and negotiation of real estate contracts and leases, business information, preparation of wills, probate, and estate planning. Their firm represents a number of builders, developers, investors, and local lending institutions, and is approved to close transactions for most local banks and mortgage companies. In addition, they offer title search, title examination services, and title insurance through several well-established title insurance companies in the Memphis area, as well as Tennessee and Mississippi. They strive to offer services in a prompt and timely fashion while advising and representing clients in a zealous and professional manner. Should their offered services be of need, please contact William N. Griffin Jr. or any of their attorneys at 901-752-1133. They can also be found online at www.gcemlaw.com or on Facebook. You're listening to the Memphis Real Estate Hour on KWAM. And now, here's your host, Dean Harris.
All right, welcome back to the Memphis Real Estate Hour. I'm your host, Dean Harris. I've got Dan Butler here in the studio this morning. We're talking about 6 ways to accurately assess rental property performance. Before the break, we talked about the 1% rule and cash flow. So there's the 1% rule, kind of goes back to $1,000 rental, $100,000 house. Cash flow, we talked about what should you count as expenses and, what to kind of typically expect. So next is net operating income. Explain that, Dan. Explain net operating income.
And I'll preface this by saying I don't hear many people talking about net operating income. But anyway, it's just income, which is your rents. Could be, if you had a multifamily, could be laundry income, late fees, all your total income minus your expenses. It's just your net operating income. It excludes your mortgage, and doesn't include your acquisition cost. Mm-hmm. So it's just the income of the property. Mm-hmm. So you're not really dividing it by anything, or you know what I mean. Like,
it just is what it is.
It is what it is. Here's how much cash. And so an investor that's got a bunch of money and he's just trying to get income per year. You see what I'm saying? Like, hey, I want to make $100,000 a year. Then this equation could make some sense.
Sure.
So
net operating income, and then number 4, return on investment. Now this is, this is good.
Yeah.
This is what we kind of breeze past the net operating income, but return on investment is a good one. It's easy to explain. And there's 2 different ways to look at it. When you analyze, return on investment, what's the first thing that you're looking at? How do you come up with that number? How do you come up with that figure?
I think that. And this is where I think people are going to even take this one a little bit different. Some are going to just take cash flow, and multiply it by 12 and divide by your total cost, which would be your...
Because some people don't count the mortgage.
That's right.
It's cash on cash, and we'll get to that. That's coming up. But, they won't count the mortgage, and they say, okay, well, I'm just paying that anyway. That is what it is. Here's what my return. To me, I use the whole thing.
Yep. And then some people include principal is return on investment, and some people include, I've seen this new build stuff, includes appreciation, and deducts depreciation. I mean, they turn a house like that example we talked about earlier with the $1,495 rent for $174,000. If you look at the performers that they put together, I mean, they're adding in all kinds of things to make that return on investment look like it's 20+%. Mm-hmm. And I get it. I mean, I get it if you're looking holistically.
Yeah.
That you got some appreciation, you got your depreciation, you got your principal pay down, and you got your cash flow. So. And
I get investors that they've got a steady flow of properties, 8, 9, 10. There's very similar properties. They're getting 11, 12% every year, and they want to increase that. There's different things you can do to your portfolio to help increase that. Buy a different kind of property, buy something that is getting you some higher numbers, better numbers, or even, take some lower numbers, something that's more consistent, more safe. There's a tons of different ways to look at it, but I take, I'll take the gross rent and divide it by the sales price. The gross rent less all of my expenses. Take out 35 or 40%, especially in the areas that I'm sending investors to, and that's kind of what we come up with. But how important is it from the very beginning to kind of forecast this out, in your opinion? Meaning, how important is it to look at your ROI in a 4, 5, 6 house portfolio versus just the one? I mean, should you be looking that far out as to what kind of properties am I buying? What should I be able to expect?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think that it's good to look at it holistically and add them all together, because you're going to have some that are lower than others, and I mean, we've talked about it internally with Douglas and I about bucketing them A, B, and C properties, and really seeing, do the A's really do
what the A's are supposed to do,
what the A's are supposed to do, and the B's supposed to, so this would be a good, calculation to figure that out. But
what do you expect? Like when you're analyzing a property and you're looking at it, what are your goals for a return on investment?
This is a tough one for me, because to be honest with you, we've never looked at it from any of these equations except for cash flow. Because we were in it, one of our absolutes that we were, a must-have was no money down.
Right.
And people think we're crazy, but that's just one of the things that we've always strived. I was like, what is this, the plural of that?
We can do a grammar lesson.
Yeah, that's right.
Too. I need one.
And so with us, that return's infinite. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, if we're not putting money out of our pocket, the return is infinite. So we've really focused on the cash flow, and that 1.5 or 2% rule. That the 1.5, 2%, whatever. That was the kind of the get you in the door conversation.
Yep.
And then it went to cash flow to make sure that if we had a 15-year note or a 10-year note, whatever the note was.
Is that because your end goal is to pay off the house, and that's what the goal is, and no matter how
Correct.
you get there, is that's fine?
Yeah,
we just want to pay it off.
I had a young guy, pepper me with questions last week about, didn't understand my methodology, and I was like, because he's like, what if the market tanks and it's now $60,000 house was worth $40,000, and I just wrote back, don't care.
I mean, at that point, can you care?
And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I don't care. And he's like, I was like, because I'm looking at cash flow, so.
Because you're not trying to leverage. I mean, you've leveraged to the point to where you're done leveraging, so now it's set and it's done, and this is the way that it's going to be.
Right.
So if the market tanks and your house is now worth $40,000, doesn't matter to you because your rent's still the same and your cash flow is still the same and your goal is still the same of paying off the house.
And this goes back to that whole model we talk about with turnkey and not turnkey and buying it at retail versus not retail.
Yeah.
That, when you buy it at retail, there is the concern. Like, well, if you, can 100% say with absolute authority that there's got to be an act of Congress for you to sell that property.
Yeah.
Then you don't care about market cyclical issues as far as appreciation and depreciation and you see what I'm saying? Like
that's getting into spreadsheeting it to death.
Yes, you're spreadsheeting that to death and talk yourself out of, well, what if the market corrected 30% like it did in 09 and 10 or whatever? And it's like,
what if the rapture came today?
I mean, I can remember driving. I told you this story before, where I paid $50,000 for a house in Berkeley, and then when the market crashed, we were paying $35,000. 3 doors down, and I was frustrated about spending the $50,000, and I was like, man, why am I frustrated?
It's still cash flowing. Like you set it up to.
And they'll both, guess what? They'll both end up at the same spot at zero. Does that make sense?
Yes, 110%. I try to explain this every day. Well, wonder if the AVR, everybody gets caught up with all these terms. Wonder if the value of this house is not, I'm going to buy it for $50,000, but it's only worth $55,000, or it's only worth $45,000.
Right.
What is your goal?
What's your goal?
Is your goal to sell this thing for appreciation later? Well, you're in the wrong city.
Right.
Is your goal to pay this house off and have it build residual income for you every month for nothing? Well, then what do you care?
Right.
This is important to me because I have this conversation all the time. And a lot of people are like, well, aren't you my agent? Aren't you supposed to get me the best deal? Yeah, and this is the best deal. Right now, currently, this is the best deal. Are you going to be able to get an appraisal for this thing and it's going to be the appraiser's going to come out there and magically say it's worth $80,000? No. You're buying a bond. You're buying a performing asset.
Right.
Whatever if it can cash flow and it can show you that income every single month, If your goal is to pay it off, you should not care. Now, if this is a 4 or 5 year thing for you, I would question whether you should get into buy and holds anyway.
You shouldn't.
Right.
Well, there's your answer.
Right. So if you should or shouldn't, but if you don't, if you do, and your goal is 4 and 5 years, this isn't the right thing to do.
No.
If you're a 15, go wholesale or flip or do something else, but paying a little bit more, for a property than what you want to, or what the market says you should, my air quotation says you should, then I just don't understand how some investors get to that point. I try to explain it to them every day. I'm like, what do you care? You're borrowing the money. Like I was talking to a guy yesterday. It's like you're borrowing the money to buy this house. You're going to put, 10 or 15, 20% down. Mm-hmm. You're going to get a great return, especially cash on cash, and we're going to get into that shortly. Yeah. But why do you care if you pay a little bit more? You've told me 25 times that your long-term goal is to have 25 or 30 of these paid off in Memphis. Why do we get so wrapped up on what the value of the home is from an appraisal standpoint? Now, if you're trying to get the cash out, okay, that's a whole different thing. Yeah. But if you're not, then I've never understood it. To me, it's the same goal that you're trying to get to. You're trying to get to the end of the finish line. That's why I don't mind using hard money and paying 10 and 12%. What do I care? If I buy it right and it cash flows, I'm using it right now. I mean, with our one of our guys. Yeah. So I don't mind it if your end goal is to pay the house off. If it's a short-term goal, 5, 6, 7 years, then maybe you consider that. But
and what people need to consider in that, and I know we got kind of digressed on the return on investment, but I think it's a great conversation because I think that the power of all that is in 5 years. Say you had 20 assets in 5 years, paying down, $200 a month times 20 is $2,000. Yeah. 24,000 times 5 is 100. You got 100,000 that you paid down. There's money there that you can then go do something else with. That's your money.
Absolutely.
That you've worked hard to use other people's money, OPM. Yeah. And you paid it down, and then there's some power to, now you got equity to the banks that you can pledge to do something else bigger, loan against it, invest in something else. I mean, there's all kinds of options.
Gives you a bunch of different avenues.
But if you don't take action, then
it's useless.
It's useless. The analysis by paralysis. The biggest thing that you can do is take action and go, make it happen.
Right. So. We're live in the studio this morning, guys. I'm going to take a real short break. I've got Dan Butler in here. We're talking about 6 ways to accurately assess rental property performance. When we come back, we're going to talk about a cap rate. It's a very popular question I get from investors nationally and here locally. So you guys stay tuned. We'll be back in just a few minutes. You're listening to the Memphis Real Estate Hour on FM 107.9 The Voice.
You're listening to the Memphis Real Estate Hour on KWAM. We'll be right back after this.
Now, here's Mid-South weather from News Channel 3's Severe Weather Center. Brought to you by the CrestCore Club, hosting the people and ideas that moved Memphis forward for nearly 30 years. Poplar and I-240. Call for a free tour at 901-684-1010.
Fantastic weather continuing across the Mid-South with sunshine and high temperatures nearing 70 this afternoon. We'll drop into the lower 40s overnight and we'll see increasing clouds on Wednesday, mid-60s for highs, and a chance for showers by tomorrow night. Let Green King Spray make your neighbors green with envy. Have the best looking yard in the neighborhood by calling Green King Spray at 901-831-9466 or visit greenkingspray.com. I'm News Channel 3's Todd Demers on The Voice, FM 107.9 and AM 990.
Is it a good time to buy or refi? Is it a buyer's market or a seller's market? Are interest rates going sky high soon? Hi, I'm Ludi Calloway, the mortgage lady at iBank Mortgage. I tell my customers to ask questions, get answers. So join me every Monday morning at 8 and I will tell you what's going on in today's still changing mortgage world. Remember, most people think about mortgages a few times in their lives. I think about them every single day. Tune in Mondays at 8.
Investors or buyers, if you're looking for the best customer service and most competitive rates on a home loan, come to Brighton Bank. They offer a quick approval process, fast closing, and they even finance 85% of the purchase in most cases. At Brighton Bank, they work with every kind of loan: BAFHA, USDA programs, traditional conventional, financing programs, long-term fixed financial, and bridge loans made easy. When it comes to home loans, they mean business. Call them today, 901-758-1740.
Griffin, Clift, Everton, and Mashmeyer, PLLC, is a full-service law firm with over 50 years of experience in the Memphis area. Real estate closings have continued to be the forefront of their law practice, which include residential, commercial, and development real estate transactions, drafting and negotiation of real estate contracts and leases, business information, preparation of wills, probate, and estate planning. Their firm represents a number of builders, developers, investors, and local lending institutions, and is approved to close transactions for most local banks and mortgage companies. In addition, they offer title search, title examination services, and title insurance through several well-established title insurance companies in the Memphis area, as well as Tennessee and Mississippi. They strive to offer services in a prompt and timely fashion while advising and representing clients in a zealous and professional manner. Should their offered services be of need, please contact William N. Griffin Jr. or any of their attorneys at 901-752-1133. They can also be found online at www.gcemlaw.com or on Facebook. You're listening to the Memphis Real Estate Hour on KWAM. And now, here's your host, Dean Harris.
All right, welcome back to the Memphis Real Estate Hour. Live in the studio with Dan Butler this morning. We are talking about 6 ways to accurately assess rental property performance. We've talked about the 1% rule, cash flow, net operating income, your ROI, return on investment. Let's talk about cap rate.
Yeah.
I get this question a lot from national investors especially.
Yeah, it's a big word.
It's a big word. What's the cap rate?
Yeah.
It's popular on bigger pockets. It's popular, dealing with multifamily. It's just something that people go to.
Especially, multifamily is the biggest.
That's the biggest one because there's so many moving parts to that.
Since we've kind of gotten more and more into that, I guess we getting that a lot more. Yeah.
I dealt with that in September.
And the next one, I think our last one really deals more with our most common investor, cash on cash returns. We'll talk about that, but.
Cap rate, this allows you to compare different types of investments, different kinds of properties. You use this with duplexes, tris, quads, multifamily. You use it with a lot of things. Yeah. When you hear cap rate, what do you think of to start analyzing and coming up with a cap rate?
I just think your all-in cost, or your net income after all your expenses divided by your total all-in cost. So if you bought a $1 million asset apartment.
Yep.
And it puts off, I'm trying to think of a number.
At that rate, at that price?
$5,000 in income a month net times 12 is $60,000, which would be, is that?
It's about
6%, right?
6. Just 100,000.
It's kind of scary to do math on the radio. But
the
whole point is
on the radio.
Yeah, that's right. 60,000. Your net income divided by your total cash. So you bought the property for, say, we helped an investor last summer, bought one for $725.
Yep.
Put $200 in it. So he's $925 plus his closing cost was probably another $30. So he's in it for $955. $955,000. Then you start taking the rents. And some people look at it cap rate as it stands right now.
Yeah.
I hear that a lot. Like right now, it's at a 5% cap rate.
Then if they value add, it's another.
Then value add, that's a huge word. I was down in Orlando, and they talked tons about value add.
That phrase too.
Yep. And I learned a new term the other day. What was that term I learned yesterday? Loss of lease. Let me see if I can find that word.
Value add is a big term that people use if they buy a property that's cheaper or that's distressed for whatever reason. Can they come in and add some value to it?
I got it. Loss to lease. So basically, that terminology means if you got a unit rented for $450 and the market rent's $550, your loss to lease is $100 a month.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because there's a lot of that going on.
There's a lot of that. That's right. So basically, cap rate, again, total cost, and then you take the total net income divided by that total cost, and that's your cap rate. And then if you value add, then that cap rate could move from, say, a 5 to a 8 or 10.
Yeah.
If you get the rents. In that particular example, we moved the rents from $425 to $550. Over 40 units, that's $4,000 a month times 12 is $48,000.
There's
in
some
income.
value add.
That's 4%
Well,
increase.
it helps your property in that situation. If you were making 50 or 60 and you go up 40, I mean, you're going up a large percentage in the value.
Well, what's crazy is, say we took that thing from a 7 cap to, or say it's a 6 when he bought it, to a 10 after you put all the value add. Well, now, instead of 955s is all in, he's going to turn around and sell that thing for 1.3.
Yes, that's what I mean. There's the value add.
At 7 cap or 8 cap.
Yep.
And,
and that's what I have a lot of investors do, is to come and look at it in that way. Dean, if I buy these 10 properties and I can value add to this, or if I buy this multifamily unit at this price, can I value add to it?
Yeah, I think the spectrum is wide. Some of the investors I talk to want the value add because they want to create that value and work hard to create that 2, 3, 4%. And some just want to perform. We got that one on Powell that somebody's got on a contract that called me the other day, that 24 units, $700 rents, $1.4 million.
Did they sell that?
They got it on a contract.
Well, that didn't take long, did it?
No, a couple days.
At the 1.4?
Yeah.
Man.
Yep.
Finding new stuff out on the radio.
It was nice to talk to him, but but his whole point was he just got a performing asset from day one. And, because he's asked me about inspections. I was like, I think it's going to come back crystal clear because
the way
everything's
condition.
Stainless steel appliances, granite countertops, nice hard floors.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and the value add in those situations on that big scale is huge. If you're buying $1 million property and, like you said, fixing it up the place, increasing the rent, cleaning up the books, next thing you know, you can make a few $100,000 on. There's your value add. So cap rate, that's how we come up with our cap rate on these individual properties and multifamily properties. So that's one of our 6. Number 6 is the cash on cash return. So, Dan, explain what cash on cash returns mean. I talk about this every day with investors, depending on what their down payment is going to be. But explain to our listeners, our new investors, what cash on cash return is.
So basically, we're just saying, what is your outlay of cash to buy that property, no matter what the property costs. So that earlier example, that $100,000 house, and you got $20,000 down, because that's most we use kind of 20% as the
that's standard.
Mm-hmm. You got $20,000 down, okay. So that leaves you $80,000 note, right, on a 30-year term. I don't know what that number is. Probably. Let me do it real quick.
Yeah, you can
while you're
estimate
talking through this.
While I'm talking through cash on cash.
Yeah.
No, it's
It is. That's a $429 payment.
Mm-hmm.
And so $429 times 12 is 48. Call it $5,000 a year.
Based on your 20% down payment, or $20,000 down payment.
And you got $12,000 in annual income minus 35% for expenses, and you're at, say, $8,500. Let's call it.
Yep.
For income minus the $5,000 for the note, so you got $3,500, and you take that $3,500 divided by the 20,000,
and you get your cash on cash return. Of
17.5%.
So
leveraging makes a huge difference.
Huge.
If you just bought that $100,000 outright, and then your cash, on 12, that would be like a 8 or 9 or 9% return.
Yes.
That makes sense?
It does, and that's still not too bad. So what Dan is explaining right now is the cash on cash. So if you buy a $100,000 property, we'll keep using that example since we've been using it. You put $20,000 down. We're talking about that cash, that $20,000. What are you getting on your return for that specific cash investment? And in this scenario, we worked it out to where it was about 17%. So a lot of investors say, well, if I'm going to be using my cash, I'm going to be using this specific amount of money. What can I get as an actual return on this money? And with that $100,000 example and $20,000 down,
17%. But the if you just did cash on cash, it's a 7.8. So I was off by 7.8%.
Yeah.
So leveraging in that stance works. What people also need to understand, like on a 15-year note, you actually go negative.
On a 15-year note?
On a cash-on-cash basis. You know, that's why I didn't like that earlier formula, the return on investment. When you start talking about, you pull in principal and all that, it shows a good return, but you actually are net negative on cash flow. That's why all these things are so intertwined, you know, and I would say just pick one or two and go with them. Yeah,
so one way to look at it is if you've got $100,000 in actual cash to spend, if you want to put that $100,000 down on one house and buy that one house and get, you know, your $1,000 in rent, $1,100 in rent, you're going to be around 7%. That's your turnkey investment, in my opinion. Or you could take that same $100,000, borrow $500,000, put 20 down on each one of those.
That's right.
And
so you bought 5 houses.
You bought 5 houses now.
Yeah.
You're getting much more income and rent every month.
Yeah, 17% return.
And your cash on cash is 17%. So there's 2 different ways to look at that, 2 different investing styles. It just depends on what you prefer. But if you're looking for an immediate return on that specific money, however you're spending that, buying more properties, putting 20% down on theirs is going to get you a higher return on that specific $100,000. Now, it sets you up for payments, you know, on $400,000, but it's just a different way to look at that specific cash. What do you prefer? I mean, I guess I know what you prefer, but what do you?
Well, I was going to say, I was going to go back to just the cap rate conversation. You know, when you use that equation and you're assuming you put say 100% down. You know, the other piece of the pie, which then turns into, I guess, a cash on cash return, is people will take that and they'll buy, say, $2 million worth of assets for cash.
Yep.
All right, and they got that 8% return. So then they go leverage 80% of it, 1.6, and go buy stuff free and clear, the next free and clear. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And they've kind of doubled down, you know, and that 8% return looks different because now you got a note on it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But you're doubling down your assets. So I think that the key to me that I've learned, being just through wise mentors, is just always trying to keep that cash working
for you all the time.
I mean, Grant Cardone, I was listening to a podcast this weekend. I mean, he believes in saving, but believes in saving and keeping that money working.
Yeah, saving, but put it to work. Don't have to sit there and do it.
Checking account, you know, like, so the same thing for me, I would say with these properties, like always keeping any equity that you have, try to keep it working some way, somehow.
Are you seeing any difference between national and local expectations? Like, in other words, national investors and local investors, do they look at it 2 different ways?
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk about that for a minute. What do the national guys look at compared to our local investors here?
I mean, national guys, they're looking at, you know, 1% rule, looking at okay with a 6 or 7% return.
Yeah.
Looking at a 10% return okay on a 20% down scenario. You know, local guys are probably, you know, more in the 1.5 to 2%. They're looking for the deals. You know, think about all the things we sell. We hardly ever sell to somebody local.
It's funny how this has shifted for me over the past couple of years, but way more of my business and way more of my clients are now out of town.
Yeah, it has shifted. I mean, it's been.
It used to be like we would have guys at dinner or church or wherever it may be come up and want to do stuff, want to invest. Now it's like, it's from a national standpoint, they're coming, and I don't know if they're coming in here more or we're just adapting to that and getting in front of those people more. I don't know what it is, but.
Well, they get so, you know, part of it is just being in the local scene and hearing things about certain neighborhoods or just Memphis in general, you know, crime and different stuff, and I think that scares a lot of the local people off. I mean, that's just my speculation.
Because they listen to the news.
They listen, so then they want to just only focus on higher end stuff, you know, and it has to be a great deal. You know,
they also think they can do it themselves because
they also think they can do it themselves. That's a ton of it.
It's not bad. I mean, you know, in some cases they can.
But you know, I tend to focus on the positive. I don't know if you saw Memphis now. Remember we had that episode about the giving.
Yep.
And Memphis is now number 1.
Yep.
You know, they were number 2 behind, I think, Salt Lake City.
Yeah, Douglas shared that on Bigger Pockets.
Bigger Pockets, yeah. So they've a lot of good stuff going on. A lot of big place for millennials to come to work. You know, a lot of Amazon's new fulfillment centers coming.
Yeah.
I saw that yesterday.
How many jobs is that supposed to create?
I don't know. Hundreds, I know. Yeah. You know, I mean, the problem with that, the only downside of that is, you know, 90% of the jobs are $12 to $15 an hour. You know, so we're not moving the economic needle of middle class. You know, getting from lower income to middle class. I mean, that's a tough situation.
I'm live in studio talking with Dan Butler, 6 ways to accurately assess rental property performance. Last question, kind of before we get ready to go here. What are one of which one of these 6 is most important to you? To an investor, when they're listening and they're watching this, some guys are experienced and some guys are not, gals are not. But what's the most important one that you look at and you say, hey, don't go away from this analyzation point when you're looking at a property?
I think that I go back to number 1 and number 2, that 1.5% for me, cash flow, and some of the absolutes for us, it's got to flow on a 15-year note or less. Mm-hmm. Whereas, a lot of, you heard Big House, what did he say, 95% of his loans are 30-year notes?
Yeah.
And, I think there's a time and a place for them. I think if I look back, I probably wish I'd started maybe with some 30-year notes just to help. Cash flow, early on, peace of mind. Like I was, it was really, really tight for several years.
Yeah.
But once you bust through that and get things settled, I think, one thing I learned is as long as you're buying, you're always going to be a little bit behind on cash flow.
That's right.
Because there's always something. Cash. It's no different than buying a house or building a house. How many people, one of my mentors who would say, take your budget, add 30%, and add another 10. Something or some kind of crazy equation. Yeah, don't if you say the new house is going to cost you $300,000, it's probably going to cost you $350,000.
Yeah.
Because all these things that you say, well, the contractors come back and say this and that. So, that's one thing that from a return on investment, that's a hard thing to calculate as well, because you got a lot of things that happen. You hit me up first thing this morning with an investor just bought a house, and you transfer another management, and the tenant wants all kinds of things, and you kind of in the spot. Do you spend the $1,000 to make them super happy and keep them for a year? Well, I guarantee that $1,000 wasn't built into his assumptions.
No,
and that's why he's fired up.
His reaction.
That's right. That's why he's fired up. He wasn't expecting that $1,000, but
yeah,
that's something we see a lot. So that's something that, to me, and again, this is where it gets into. Don't look at it as a monthly return.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not in an annual. Look at what's the last 2-3 years. What's the ongoing performance. And then I'd say I'd leave with this as far as just whatever return calculations you pick up, stick by those as far as
stick to your guns.
Stick to your guns. Don't get emotions in it. I had an investor that wanted to sell everything because he had some maintenance expense.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, dude, 6 out of your 9 are awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. I said the other 3, one of them we've already sold, which was half of,
your problem.
The problem, literally half of it, and the other 2 are still on the market to be sold. And if they sell, then everything you got left is solid cash flowing properties.
Focusing on the negative.
So you get caught up in you just focus on the numbers. I guess what I would say is just
focus on those.
Focus on the numbers. Don't get pulled in the emotions, and that will be a very freeing moment. When you look at it as a business, don't get the emotions in it and focus on the numbers.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, man.
Great information today. Dan Butler with CrestCore Realty talking about 6 ways to accurately assess rental property performance. I'm going to give you our investment of the week real quick, guys. 3204 Christine Lane. 3204 Christine Lane. 3 bedrooms, 1 bath. This property is occupied at $825 a month. We kind of gave you a similar example of this earlier. Price is $54,900. 3000 block of Christine Lane, 38118, my favorite zip code to start off in. 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, and this one's occupied at $825. I thank you guys for listening to the Memphis Real Estate Hour today. Dan, thanks again for joining me. We'll be back next Tuesday, next Tuesday at 8 a.m. So thank you for listening. Go to the Facebook page and check out the Memphis Real Estate Hour. You can always get all these investments of the week on our website, www.crestcorerealty.com. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next Tuesday on the Memphis Real Estate Hour.